Hey everybody, welcome to the RFP Success Show. This is Lisa Rehurek. I am your host, and I'm also founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company. So today we're going to talk about how to be a top performer. We get this question a lot from people where they say, I kind of feel like I'm not standing out. I feel like I'm being passed over for new opportunities. And it's just a really hot topic because it is not enough to just do the job that you're hired for well. Let me repeat that. It is not enough to do the job that you were hired for well. So that is what you're hired to do. You are hired to do a job and you're hired to do it well. And so you need to exceed expectations in order to become a top performer. And exceeding expectations generally is doing things outside of what is expected of you. And this is a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp, but it's very important. Even as a business owner, being a top performer, there are things that show up. So maybe you don't need to be a top performer for your boss, obviously, because you're the business owner, you are the boss. But if you want to be a top performer in your industry, if you want to be somebody that is seen as a top business performer, and you want your business to perform at that level, there are a series of things that you need to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of these are very intangible, and that's what makes it so hard, especially for those of you who are employed. When you go to talk to your boss for, hopefully you guys get annual feedback, at least annual feedback, or you have a goal setting conversation. These are hard conversations to have because they tend to be very intangible. They're things that it's hard to say, hey, I want you to work over 40 hours a week, or hey, I want you to do things on your own time. These are things that you need to take upon yourself. Nobody's going to tell you. That's number one thing of a top performer. Nobody has to tell them what to do or how to do it. They are resourceful. They seek it out. They crave it. They want it. They want to be better, and they constantly seek new information, new ways to do things. We call it intellectually curious. So they always want to be learning. That is the number one thing. They are intellectually curious. So if you are not somebody that's intellectually curious, I would ask myself, why? Why am I not doing that? Why am I not stepping up? And do I want to? You don't have to want to. And that's the other thing. Not everybody in the world can be a top performer. Not everybody can be the best of the best. But if you want to be, then there are things you have to do, and this is one of them. You need to become an intellectually curious person. The second thing is being resourceful, and I mentioned this already, but let's talk about it again. Being resourceful means that you don't run and ask somebody how to do something all the time. You go and you figure it out, you research, you do some things, you ask questions, but you don't walk up to somebody and say, how do I do this? A better question might be, hey, I'm not quite sure how to do this, but here are the steps that I was thinking of taking. I would like to get your advice to make sure that I'm not, going off into a rabbit hole and wasting my time. So that's the difference between somebody who's resourceful and somebody who's not. We'll get job applicants and they'll come into the interview and they'll say something. I mean, this is a really simplistic, resourceful thing, but you'd be surprised. They'll come into our interview and they'll ask, so, when was your business started, or how long have you been in the business? And I'm like, all they needed to do was read the website and they would learn. You could have done a little bit of digging on my LinkedIn profile to learn more about me, but they ask me questions that are laid out on my LinkedIn profile. So be resourceful. People really, it's funny how we judge people, and we do, whether you like that word or not, we judge people. And we judge people based on their competency level in the work environment. And so if you're constantly asking for things that could easily be found, or that the other person has to kind of take a big step back and explain it all to you, that can eventually get tiresome, and then you just start to become somebody that is a burden. And we don't want that. I'm not saying to not ask questions. You just want to ask smart questions. And when you're resourceful, then you will ask those smart questions, which leads me into number 3, asking effective questions. Again, it's not about not asking the question, it's about asking smart and effective questions. And you can't really ask smart and effective questions if you haven't done your homework or if you haven't been resourceful. Now, there's a time and a place where you can ask stupid questions. If you're in a meeting, if you're working with somebody and it's something that you don't know and you need to know right then and there, and you don't have time to research it, you can just say, hey, can somebody explain to me what that acronym means? Or, asking different questions depending on the context. But you want to be careful because you want to be seen as somebody who asks effective and smart questions, because that is what top performers do. And it's a skill. All of these, by the way, are skills. So you have to make a commitment to deciding that you want to improve your skills in these areas. And when you make that commitment, you will seek out the information that you need and kind of take one of these at a time. After you maybe write all these down and then say, okay, where do I grade myself on each one of these, and where do I want to be? Top performers would want to be A pluses in all of those areas, and start working one at a time on how to improve those. That was just a little sidebar there, but asking effective and smart questions. You also have to be willing to be vulnerable in your weaknesses and sharing about yourself. So top performers do not know everything. And this is something that it's a bit of a myth. People think you're a top performer because you know all the answers. That's not at all true. There is no way that anybody can know all the answers. But what they can do is be willing to admit when they don't know the answer. Be open to the smart, competent, capable people around them to get the answers for. And it's okay when we have weaknesses. Generally, we as business leaders or business performers, business professionals, we have 3 to 5 things that we're really good at, that we could stand up and defend in court and say, yes, I'm really good at these things. The rest of it, it's not that we are bad at it, but it's not that we're great at it. There's probably somebody else that's much better at it than we are. So why don't we let them do it, or at least ask them about it? Get their input, get their feedback. So being willing to be vulnerable about what you don't know is another trait of top performers. Okay. And the fifth and the last one is top performers are not, actually this is the last one, but then there's also kind of an overarching theme I want to talk about. But the last one is really not being a yes man, yes woman. The phraseology is yes man, but what that means is that you can't sit back and always just agree because you don't want to get in trouble. Top performers push back when they see something that doesn't make sense to them. It's not about questioning authority. What it is about questioning the status quo. Well, why are we doing it that way? Is there a better way to do it? I guarantee you, if you ask the question, if something is confusing, let's say there's a process that you all are discussing and it just doesn't make sense to you, there's something confusing about it, stop and ask the question, because I guarantee you one of 2 things is probably going on. Number one, it has been so embedded in people's brains that they haven't really thought through it enough to notice that it doesn't make sense. Or number 2, they were just afraid to say something. So top performers are the ones that step up and say something. They don't say yes just to say yes. And I know it can be uncomfortable. You've got to also know who you're dealing with, because if you are dealing with somebody who is, quite frankly, a narcissist, that's not going to get you very far. But if you're in a healthy climate and a healthy environment, asking those questions to kind of, again, push back on the status quo, challenge the same old way of thinking, it's going to elevate your credibility. And that's what top performers do. So those are the 5 things that really I wanted to talk about today, to be able to share with you what you need to do to become a top performer. Now, with all of that, and embedded in each one of these are kind of that commitment to excellence, the commitment to saying, this is who I want to be, this is what I want to be. It is not about just a tomorrow thing. Tomorrow I am going to be really good at my job so I can be seen as a top performer. No, it's a way of being. It is a holistic branding of yourself that you need to think about, and you have to be all in. And I would say that top performers, once they get into that state of being a top performer, they don't really think about that anymore. They've developed these habits of intellectually curious. That's that continuous learning, continuously wanting to read and learn about different things and improve their skills. I was working with a client not too long ago, and one of the things they said is that we can't ask our employees to do this. They don't have time to do this type of stuff in their workday. And I'm like, well, your top performers are going to float to the top because they're going to be the ones that want to do it in their off time. Now, I'm not saying we want people to go out and spend, an hour or 2 hours every day. You can spend 15 to 30 minutes every day or 5 days a week really honing your skill of being a top performer. And over time, you're going to develop these habits that top performers have. So I don't want you to think that you have to put in a crazy amount of time. You just need to start getting that mindset and wrap your brain around the fact that this is who you want to be as a person, as a business owner, as an employee, whatever that looks like for you, because you want to be seen as a top performer. There's something else that I want to talk about that kind of overarches all of this, is as a top performer, you also have to be able to be mentally, physically, emotionally strong. And what that looks like is emotional intelligence, health and wellness, mental fortitude, resilience. And that, again, those are all things that are habits, that are skills, things that you need to learn over time. Emotional intelligence helps you with the emotional side of things, making sure that you can manage stress, manage your emotions, manage your reaction to other people's emotions. Obviously, health and wellness. I got to tell you, that's the biggest struggle for me. All this other stuff has come easy for me, but the health and wellness is harder for me. So I have to develop habits. I have to stay on course. I have to have coaches that help me. And I still fall off every now and then, and I can feel it. If I am not in peak health, then my brain, I get brain fog because I have an autoimmune disorder. So if I'm not eating the right kinds of foods, my brain doesn't work as well as it should. I'm not as creative. I'm not as on. I am just not as dialed in. Sometimes I can fake it because I have all these other pieces of the puzzle. You will be the same. There are things that you can fake for moments, but at the end of the day, I sit down and I say, okay, what is hindering my performance right now? And I can tell exactly what it is, and I got to jump into action to adjust. So I'm not saying that you're going to get all of this stuff right and it's going to be perfect all of the time. No, you're going to fall off that wagon. You're going to have to adjust. Emotional intelligence is another one. I can be emotionally intelligent 80% of the time, and then I drive down the road and all bets are off because somebody ticks me off. So it's about understanding what our triggers are and getting back on track, understanding when we have fallen off track and when we can get back on track. So in addition to kind of those 5 things that I talked about, right, kind of on the onset of this podcast, you've got to think about how you're managing those 5 things and how you're managing yourself emotionally, mentally, and physically, so that you can ensure that you are keeping up the energy and the focus in order to hone those 5 skills. And again, those 5 skills, let's repeat them. The first one, being intellectually curious. The second one, being resourceful. Number 3 is asking effective and smart questions. Number 5 is being vulnerable. And again, kind of being vulnerable in the pieces of what you know and what you don't know. That it's a lot about confidence, right? It's very much about understanding that it's okay to have a weakness. Let me tell you something else about vulnerability. I guarantee you that everybody else can see your weaknesses no matter how hard you try to hide them. And this happens all the time. I see it all the time in myself, in other people, where I can see, very perfectionistic people are so afraid of being wrong. And what's funny is that we can all generally see through that. I'm a recovering perfectionist, I will admit. And it's funny when I look back now and I think about that, it really was so many times where I was holding on so tight to not being wrong. And I am 100% sure that everybody around me saw right through me. So just know that you're not fooling anybody. So it's okay to be vulnerable. And then number 5 was, don't always be a yes man, yes woman, whatever you want to call it. Challenge the status quo when you see something that isn't working right. Because as a top performer, your role is to help the organization get better. Plain and simple. Top performers help the organization get better. Whether it's financially more efficient, more value add, better customer service, whatever that is. And if we just go along with the status quo, then things aren't necessarily getting better, and you're not playing a part in helping that get better. So you want to be a contributor, you want to be a top performer. Those are the things you need to pay attention to. And again, you need to pay attention to your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. That is our episode for today, how to be a top performer. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We will be back here in 2 weeks. Again, my name is Lisa Rehurek, your host of the RFP Success Show. Thanks for joining today, everybody.